Hello, I'm Rick Reimer, the Executive Director of the Oklahoma Soybean Board, and today we're here with Tommy Salisbury, a producer just north of Collinsville. This is along the Caney River, so we're going to call this bottom ground. Very productive for summer growing crops, and let Tommy just tell you kind of what he's doing here today. Some of the equipment that he's using is in the background, and let him describe the type of farming we're doing here today. Tommy?
All right. Yesterday we ran out of moisture in prior times. Yesterday we got a little moisture in the ground from a rain. We came in yesterday and no-tilled this ground. And today behind me I'm spraying paraquat with some Preemergent, trying to get ahead of the weeds as much as we can.
So underneath the ground that we see here and out in these fields, the soybeans are already planted in the ground.
Yeah, about an inch and a quarter.
Okay. And so, as part of the weed control program, you're going to go over the top of these then and try to kill everything on the top. What other weed control strategies will you use after the beans come up?
After the beans come up, we'll hit it with a round of Roundup and dicamba. As long as we can continue to use dicamba, it's really effective, especially with pigweed or hemp or anything that Roundup has become resistant to Roundup. But you're allowed 44 ounces a year of application on dicamba. We come in with a first application of Roundup and 22 ounces per acre of dicamba, and then if need be, we come back later in the year. We're getting pretty late in the planting season, so we may not need a separate application after our burn down.
So we're talking about planting season. What is the typical planting window for soybeans?
Well, we like to start as soon as the ground temps up. If we can get anything above 58, 60 degrees, we hit the ground running. We've planted as early as April 18th, and you generally can go to July 15th, but 90% out of the time, unless you're planting a short-term bean, you're out of moisture and out of rain and kind of just kicking the dust, really.
So what I heard you say as far as varieties, if you plant late in the planting season, you change the variety of the beans. You might tell some of our viewers.
Yeah, a shorter term. So most of what we plant, we start out in April. We start out with a group 6, and then once we get into May, we go to 5, because that's a shorter term, shorter growing season. And then, if you get into July, a lot of guys will do group 3s or something to try to make it mature faster before the frost.
So harvest time for this field or any of the other
probably Halloween or the end of November. This is obviously later. We planted group 5s here because that's what we had. We had all that rain come through, and we're trying to use up our group 5s before we use a little bit of our group 4s. Like I said, we would have continued to, we would have been done 2 weeks ago, but we ran out of moisture. 1 week it was too wet to do anything, and the next week we didn't have any moisture to get it to germinate.
So this ground here, though, river bottoms, this river is the Caney River. Last year we had historic rains and flooding. Did this ground here go underwater?
Yeah, this was about 4 to 5 foot underwater where we're standing at. That happened May 21st, and the water stayed here till I think June 11th, somewhere in there. We were well over 20 days underwater. So.
Now, after the waters receded, were you able to come back in, do some tillage, and get a crop in?
We attempted to. We had some sodium issues from salt water upriver during the flood. Some saltwater tanks had got, and that was very widespread. We're in Vera here, and we had it in Ramona and Bartlesville, partially over at Avant. And what had happened was the lowest places that held water was the very last to get it off, so all that salt water concentrated to there and raised the sodium levels, so we didn't even have weeds germinating. So yes, we did. We were able to work it, come back in, replant, and we didn't really get a crop at all because of the sodium issues.
For some of our high school students and maybe even some of the producers watching on our website, and you talk about chemical applications, and behind us, chemical applicator, that doesn't sound cheap.
No, it gets expensive quick, but at the end of the day, I was always told you got to spend money to make money. If you can put a bean in the ground and be cheap about it, but at the end of the day, you reap what you sow. You're not going to have a good crop if you don't put the inputs that you need. And that's a science behind it. I mean, chemicals part of it, but the other side of it is your ground. I was always told planting is just as important as harvesting. Harvesting, you want to make sure you're not throwing trash out the back end. Well, the same when you're planting. You want to have a right depth with the right moisture, the perfect closing wheel. and closing the row up so that it has all three things it needs to sprout and have a good crop. So.
Some of the people watching may be curious about a price range for a piece of equipment like that.
That one's a little older. That's a 2015 120-foot booms, 4830 John Deere. It's probably right around $180,000 to $200,000 used. Brand new, you're well over $500,000, right around that range for a nice one. The new R series sprayers. But then on top of that, you got your chemical totes and your trailer, nurse trailer, and semi, and none of it's cheap. So.
It just points out to a lot of the people watching how intensely capital intensive or financial intensive farming is.
Absolutely. Well, and the other thing I would like to point out is there's so much media coverage about how farmers are trying to hurt the environment with chemicals and GMO and all this other stuff, but at the end of the day, if anybody's more respectable of land, I would almost point towards us, because our livelihood comes out of that ground. We don't go to work every day and have a paycheck that comes in every week. You know, we solely rely on the top 6 inches of topsoil and our God to give us a good crop, you know. So.
And farmers, as we always have heard, are price takers, not price makers.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
when you go to buy chemicals, you pay what they ask,
yeah.
And whenever you take your beans to the elevator,
and we pay shipping both ways, as John F. Kennedy said.
Right. Yeah, well, we certainly know you got a lot to do today, and we appreciate you taking the time to visit with us very much.
Yeah, no problem. Glad I could help.
You bet. Thanks.